Hey there, guys. Hey, just wanted to have a kind of an interesting video for you. We're going to talk a little bit about Japanese baseball, and especially this year's Chunichi Dragons. There was a tweet the other day talking about how this is one of the worst offensive teams you can imagine. I was curious to see if this was actually one of the worst offensive teams in Japanese baseball history, and so that's what we're going to kind of look into. So we'll take a quick look over here. First of all, at Baseball Reference, this is updated as of today, whatever day it is. We're not quite up to the end of the season. Yeah, this has the games from, I think, September 16th in them. As you can see here, in terms of runs scored, it ranges from 518 down to 348. I did the math. The average is around 466, but the thing that skews it is the Chunichi Dragons, who have scored only 348 runs. That's pretty bad. That's pretty bad for under 30 games played. I mean, in the major leagues here, that would be historically bad. In terms of pitching, what we can see just after a glance, looking at runs allowed, is that there's something with their ballpark that's making this happen, because they've only given up 457 runs, which is not that big of an outlier, but it still is considerably less than average. Hanshin, by the way, look like an all-time great team. So we'll go ahead and look at our favorite tool, and I will bring this up over here for us. This is our favorite domination index. As you can see, we put in the runs scored and runs allowed totals. There's a discrepancy by probably 1 run between the two. I'm not sure. I haven't been able to figure out where it's from. I'm not going to look that close, whatever. That's why the average for runs scored and runs allowed is slightly different. It's not going to make a huge difference. It's very, very small. The standard deviation is around the same here, and what we can see is, of course, the Hanshin Tigers, and we'll do a little bit of this sort of action here for you. There we go. That'll make it a little bit more readable. The Hanshin Tigers, who are up in first place. Let's see here. We want to go over to view and freeze rows and columns. There we go. Tigers have a very, very good runs scored and runs allowed differential, making them somewhat dominant. This isn't like historically dominant, but it's up there. Meanwhile, Chunichi are really, really bad in terms of domination, but it's mostly because of their inability to score runs. I mean, this is really, really bad. So the question here, of course, is how does this compare to real life? So we're looking here at, this is actually the Pacific. We want to look at the Central. So we'll go here and look at the Japan Central Division. So you can see I haven't really prepared anything here. I probably should do this before I get into this, but this will give you an idea of how we set this up. Actually, you know what? I had it set up for the most dominating defensive teams of all time. I'll set it up for the teams that are dominated. This is going to take a little second to calculate, and the reason why is just sort of because of how Excel, or in this case LibreOffice Calc, works, and because of how we've had to set this up. So you can see with the formulas, I've had to use a little bit of index match going on, and I've had to match this up with standard deviation calculated elsewhere. You can do this differently. You can put in... see if I get this right. You can put in macros in these cells, but if you do that, it will take like a week or something to calculate. I mean, it's so slow. So you don't want to do it that way. What we can see here, though, interestingly enough, is that in terms of, I'm looking at runs allowed. I want to look at runs scored. So we'll do this again. We want runs scored, a domination index, and we want this to go ascending. So we want to go from the worst up to the best. And just see how bad the worst is. Yeah, Chunichi in 2021 had a minus 2.039. This is compared to this year so far, and we're almost done with the season, where, as you can see behind my head, they have minus 2.146. And so according to the domination index, this season, they have one of the worst runs scored, probably the worst runs scored total in Japan history. Does this mean that they're the worst offense of all time? Probably not. Right? Probably not. You notice that Chunichi's here again in 2022. Like I said, there's a sign that this might be the ballpark, 2020, 2021, 2022. You can do the research for yourself. I'm going to do a little bit of research on this as well before I write an article about it. I think that this is probably a sign that Chunichi has a ballpark that is causing this to happen. I mean, their pitching seems to be just fine. You know, they're doing better than average each one of these seasons, although this is right on the border. This season as well, they're kind of right on the border, but they're right around average. But man, the batting is just not there at all, and they seem to be completely incapable of scoring runs. What you're seeing here is, at least in terms of the Central Division, the worst performance by a team in Japan baseball history. Now let's go ahead and take a look over here at the Pacific Division. and we'll see what we can come up with. So we'll look here again at runs scored, ascending. Again, it's going to take us a second to calculate all of this. This is really cool, though, right, that we can do this automatically. And you can see that it's the Chippewa Marines 1997 who had that minus 1.965, which tells me, again, that this Chunichi team is pretty bad. Now, you're probably wondering, well, how does this compare with the major leagues and with teams that we know? Very good question. Let's go take a look. So in the major leagues, we're going to look first. Remember that I have this divided up into American and National League. Now, I know that there is interleague play, right? And that's the first thing that you're going to be talking about. You're going to say, well, what about interleague play? You're not accounting for it. I'm not. You could. You'd have to do a little bit of figuring, though, and would be difficult. Worst all time, of course, is the 1899 Cleveland Spiders, who had a minus 2.858. There's no way anyone's going to catch that level of offensive futility. They're also almost certainly the worst team in the history of baseball, probably anywhere you look, but there is a story behind it. Second worst, bet you didn't see this coming, 1969 San Diego Padres, the expansion team. Third worst, the Marlins, but not that 98 Marlins team that I remember being so bad, rather the 2013 team, right? Now remember that ballparks are going to skew things pretty much here, but in the case of Cleveland, I don't think that anything could skew it. Look at how bad the pitching is, too. This was just an awful team. Chunichi would rank somewhere around 2.14. They rank somewhere around the 22 Boston Braves in that sense. So between the 93 Marlins and the 22 Braves, that's a pretty poor offense. Look over here at the American League just for the purpose of comparison, and let's see what we come up with. So we'll do the same thing. Data and sort, and then we'll go over here to the run scored DI, and then we sort again from bottom to top, and we come up with the 1983 Seattle Mariners. How about that? I know about that team, and that was a hitter's ballpark. That is bad. The Kingdom was a hitter's park, not a pitcher's park. And the 2002 Detroit Tigers, the 2010 Seattle Mariners. I was actually in Seattle for part of that, visiting family, and that's when they were talking about it being maybe one of the worst teams of all time. 81 Blue Jays were bad. 79 Oakland Athletics almost certainly are one of the worst teams of all time. And when we get to where Chunichi would fit in, it would be probably right around here, the 89 Indians, 98 Devil Rays. I keep mentioning it. Remember, there was a guy who got the 98 Devil Rays to win the pennant on Diamond Mines. Maybe we should do that. Think of 75, I bet you don't think of the Detroit Tigers and their offense, right? So, I mean, there you have it, right? That gives you sort of an idea of where the Chunichi Dragons fit in historically. This is one of the worst offensive performance relative to the league that we've ever seen in baseball history. So we'll see what happens. As always, if you're interested in playing around with this stuff, you can get the spreadsheet that I use in the members area of my Substack. Costs $5 a month to get in there, and you'll get other statistics that I upload as soon as I'm done figuring them and throwing things together. And there you go. As soon as the seasons are done in America and in Japan, I'm going to update this spreadsheet, and we'll share it with you so you have a little bit more to play with, a little bit more to poke around with, and look at yourself. I have a lot of fun going through this and comparing different teams and figuring out what teams are challenging to manage and what ones are not. I don't know how you feel about it. But there you have it. Hope you enjoy this one. I'll talk with you again tomorrow. Bye.